this is green button? Perfect. Okay, cool. So I just wanted to say I'm really honored to be in this lineup with so many incredible Métis icons. And yeah, I'm going to start by introducing myself and positioning myself in relation to where I come from. My name is Margaretta Cabana Boucher. I was born here in Saskatoon. I grew up on 7th Street, just across the river. I've been living in Vancouver on the stolen territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations for the last 8 years. On my father's side, I'm Métis from Red River. Our family settled in St. Louis, and my great-grandfather is Jean-Baptiste Boucher. My great-grandmother is Caroline L'Esperance, and they settled our homestead there. My grandfather, Raymond Boucher, grew up there, and my father, Albert Lionel Boucher, moved to Saskatoon, and here we are. So on my maternal side, I'm British through my grandmother, and she played a vital role in raising myself and my siblings. So I'm very connected to that side of my family as well, which shows in my work. And yeah, I hold a lot of love for my family and those who have come before me, and that's kind of the forefront of my practice. So yeah, my research centers on an exploration of Métis identity and Métis ways of knowing through a practice-based method of inquiry into beadwork. Initially, I began creating beaded objects within my studio practice as a way to navigate, bigger themes surrounding my relationship to my immediate family. I was kind of interested in everyday objects and their abilities to communicate stories and worlds. So I see the objects as vessels of remembering and of re-remembering. And I kind of see these works as gifts or offerings to ancestors. This is another one that I created here. So I want to speak specifically to the 3 offerings within this exhibition. The pieces are Move, You're in My Spot, Like One of Your Mitchell Florals, and Reunion Song 2022. These pieces were a result of my MFA thesis exploration and research at OCAD, which were guided by Kathy Métis and Peter Morin. With this body of work, I wanted to create objects that acted as love stories and ones that connected my relationship with my family, and that through my own retelling opened up space to tell the stories of my ancestors. So the 2 main themes that I've been working through and in my research and my making are the Métis self-archive and autobiographical beadwork. The concept of the Métis self-archive kind of grew out of, what am I trying to say here? Sorry, I lost my spot. It grew out of wanting to know more about the Métis women in my family. My family is the Bouchers. There's a lot of grand stories about the men and the war heroes, but there isn't a lot of stories about Caroline L'Esperance or Julia LaRoche, which kind of was the same thing within my research into the archive. There was a lot of information about the men, and the women were just footnotes in their stories. So it kind of made me question, what would become of my stories and who would tell my stories. So I created this concept of the Métis self-archive to just represent myself and to be made for my future ancestors. While I was making these pieces, I found out that I was pregnant, and then all my works became pieces that this future ancestor was on her way, and they were gifts and offerings to her. So one way I've attempted to use access within this work is through the creation of the autobiographical beadwork. So I'm playing with stylistic elements. I've adapted my own style as well as traditional Métis floral designs, kind of rooted in more contemporary ways of play. I use a floral outline and opt out on the fill often as kind of a way to play with painterly gestures and embrace mistakes that so often happen when creating beadwork. You'll see in a lot of my work that I use a technique which I call beading over. This act is, sorry, I messed myself up again. I just bead over pre-existing fabrics, perfect. Creating these objects, transforming the objects and creating objects of Métis resistance and resilience. In my piece, Move You're in My Spot, you can see this represented. This isn't that piece. Somewhere in here. I'm skipping through. There you go, it's part of it. So this is an installation of my family home. The beaded designs on the couch become imprints of the people who have passed through that space. The piece, like one of your Métis florals, which is up there, is a beaded loom painting, as I like to call it. The flowers are from my grandmother's living room, and they were gifted to her from my granddad. They've lived on her walls for as long as I can remember, and I kind of see this transformation from painting to beaded painting as reflective of like the many moments I've spent visiting and sharing in those spaces. And each bead, when I was tacking them down, well, I'm lying, probably like every other row, I was thinking of a memory or a person who had passed through that space and had impacted my life's trajectory. And then I'm just thinking about how these spaces can be sites of knowledge transfers in traditional practice. So this is my final piece in the show, which is Reunion Song 2002. It's based on a family song from the Boucher family songbook, which I see I've written text right in the middle of there, oops. So it's a song that we often sing at our family reunions, and I wanted to take this song and create my own rendition of it. The original one spoke to the family homestead in St. Louis and my father and his father's experience growing up on that land. And I wanted to take it and speak to my experience with my siblings growing up here in Saskatoon, and then hoping that the future rendition would be created by my daughter, and she could speak to her experience. And with this, I was really thinking of, displacement or Métis diaspora that often happens with the separation of family, and ways that we can come together and kind of mend this bond through ancestral collaboration. And I think I would like to maybe just go back really quick to a few of those images I skipped through. But I would like to read this poem that I wrote for my daughter while I was creating these works. Do I still have time? 2 minutes, cool. I'll read it and I'll try not to cry, because I always cry. It's called My Little Spirit Bead. Daughter, I made these works for you, my future ancestor. I created this document, these pieces, this Métis self-archive for you, so you wouldn't have to search my name or dig too deep for my stories. You could speak with confidence to who I was and what I loved. I created this work so you would know my stitch. You would recognize me by the way I placed my beads. You would never feel alone amongst beaded objects because you would know they are family and you are home. Imagine you adorned and protected as you carried the knowledges of our ancestors in those same threads. I imagined you studying and learning from my designs and one day creating your own. Your fingers touching the surface of the fabric, memorizing the textures, the shapes, the tensions of the threads. And as you learned, you remembered and taught the next generation how to look, how to remember too. I made these works so our ancestral ties would never break. Past, current, and future ancestors could live in reciprocity together in the worlds we have created for one another. I made these works so you would know you belong to me and I to you, and through our shared lineage, we would hold each other up in our remembering. And I'm not going to read the rest because I'll cry. So thanks so much for bearing with me there.